All right, everybody, welcome back into another episode of Stadium Seat Sports. As always, my name is Coop here with my partner and co-host Kriv. And Kriv, look, man, we got the best weekend in college football in the regular season. That's rivalry weekend. We have so many great games to look forward to. Guys, on this episode, we're going to go into three games in more of a deep dive, and that's going to be the game. So it's going to be Michigan traveling to Columbus to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're going to look at South Carolina and Clemson. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up with Texas traveling to Kyle Field to take on Texas A&M. And then at the end, we're going to talk about two games here that we think could have some implications. Just give you our thoughts on those games with a quick pick 'em rather than a deep dive into the two games at the end there. So, Crib, honestly, for me, man, the game is the game that made me fall in love with college football. Like the history between, in this game, the history of both programs, the hatred, the vitriol, everything about it, I just love so much. So I think it's only right that we start with that game. And I'll throw it over to you to kind of kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. The game is called the game for a reason. And as Urban Meyer says, it is the greatest rivalry in all of sport, not
Yep,
not just college football. This is pure hatred. This is the game that matters more than any other game. And that's exactly why this is a must-win game for Ryan Day.
fully
Yes,
agree.
he has one win against them dating back to 2019. COVID season didn't happen, and then of course we know how the last 3 years played out. And for Ryan Day, it truly is all or nothing.
Yep,
And they, on paper, this is probably the best matchup for them they have had since 2019, if not better.
sure. Yeah.
Michigan's obviously struggled this year. The line for this game is at this time of recording is now minus 21 for
Oh,
Ohio
okay.
State. So it's shifted half a point to them. I think it
Yeah. It's
started off
20 and a
even.
half.
Yeah, and I think it actually was at like 24 at one point.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think
so
so.
so people are betting on Ohio State here.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, I think they have a path to victory. I think Warren has improved a lot at quarterback. Obviously, he was benched at one point this year. Since he's come back, he shows some capability to buy some time and make some impressive throws. And I know he makes a few mistakes here and there. He's not a highly rated guy or anything like that, but he has improved enough that he could give them a puncher's chance, at least from a quarterback making some kind of outlandish throw that can bust the game open or keep them close. But
Yeah.
really, for me, the three keys for Michigan to pull off this upset are Mullins just being himself. The guy's a beast. He's very effective. I know they had Donovan Edwards behind him, but he is the guy.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
he's a workhorse back. He's dynamic. He doesn't need the perfect blocking as much as a guy like Donovan Edwards does. Edwards is obviously a home run hitter, but Mullins is more that every down he can make something happen kind of guy.
Yep.
Very dangerous. Ohio State's had some issues with the run game here and there defending that, so
Yeah.
that's one avenue for them. The other is Loveland. I mean, he is a stud. He's a great quarterback, or sorry, tight end. Definitely not
Yep.
quarterback, but maybe they should try him there. Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah. Throw them in.
But for me, it's very similar to how Penn State relied so much on Tyler Warren.
Yeah. Great
He was
point.
the do-it-all tight end. He is a big part of their offense. Loveland's the same way for Michigan. Ohio State does have someone who can take him out, and that's Caleb Downs. I mean, the guy's a stud, future top 10 pick. He shadowed Warren and he took him out of the game until I think Warren scored on like a wildcat play or something against
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State.
Yep.
But very similar in the passing game. He didn't get to do a whole lot, and that's because Downs shadowed him everywhere.
Yeah.
And I expect the same to be in this game. So if Ohio State can remove Loveland from the game, it's going to be a very hard day for Michigan's already struggling offense.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, Mullins can do some damage. But really, for me, the big wild card for Michigan is that defensive line going up against a makeshift Ohio State offensive line. And
That's a great point.
I give Ohio State credit. They've had multiple big injuries with Seth McLaughlin and Josh Simmons going down, and they've had to shuffle twice.
Yeah.
And the line has actually looked pretty solid.
Yeah, I agree.
And even last week it looked solid, and we didn't know what to expect with Carson Hinsman shifting over to center, bringing in Austin Saraveld at left guard. They look pretty good. And to me, if they can just hold back that incredibly talented Michigan defensive line
Mhm.
and not let them disrupt the game at a high level, uh, they should pull this out. But if Michigan can lean on their guys, they have multiple first round talent guys on that interior there.
Yeah.
And I mean, with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, those guys are game wreckers.
Yeah.
And especially with them being in the trenches there, I mean, anything can happen, especially if they get pressure on Will Howard. Ohio State can't get the run game going. I mean, Judkins and Henderson, they've been playing all right, but that run game has not looked great the last few weeks. If
Yeah.
if anything, it's been the other way around. The Ohio State's passing game has looked great, and for whatever reason, the run game has struggled a tiny bit. I mean, it's still been solid, but it's not what you expected with Judkins and Henderson.
Right. And honestly, that's what I was going to say real quick, not to interrupt you, but like the offensive line, especially the makeshift offensive line, has been very good. But I feel like they've been good at times in the, run game in terms of getting a push and allowing Junkins and Henderson to get lanes. They've been really solid overall in giving Howard time to sit
Yeah,
back in the pocket. So they've been really solid in that regard in pass blocking. In terms of run blocking and opening up lanes, that's where you've seen a little bit of a difference. And I think that's why, to your point, you've seen Ohio State have a lot more success in throwing the football over the last couple of weeks versus running the football. They've not been horrific in running the football, but I think the pass blocking has been far better than run blocking and opening up lanes for that stable running backs.
yeah, and I'd say that's surprising because you would think with a makeshift offensive line, you would probably think the run game's easier to kind of project out. And all of a sudden, these guys are dropping back. Will Howard has time and he's finding guys. And I'm sure you'll talk to this more, but Will Howard's improved a ton over the last
Yep.
few weeks, especially. And his leadership fingerprint is all over this team. I mean, he has an edge to him. Some people didn't like how he acted at the end of the Indiana game, but I can tell you one thing: Ohio State fans who watched Kyle McCord last year love the fact they have a quarterback who has fire.
Yep.
And maybe he doesn't have all the talent in the world, but that leadership and that fire, like that is a championship caliber trait. And it might rub people the wrong way depending on how you look at it, but it's something
Right.
Ohio State's been sorely missing. So with that being said, I do think Ohio State's going to win this game at
Wish we did.
minus 21. I don't know if they have in a rivalry game to hang that close. But or sorry, to win by 21.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be around a 10 to 14 point game, but I think Ohio State's going to win. So, but I'll kick it
Wish
over
we
to
did.
you and get your input.
Yeah, well, you're going to get Bella's input as
Yeah,
well. You can
apparently.
hear her
Yeah.
making an appearance
Yeah.
on the podcast here today. But listen, I'm not going to go too into detail on the things that you mentioned because I think that you really hit a good overview of what it's going to take for Michigan to win. Loveland is obviously a key. That game wrecking defensive line is obviously a key, and just the play calling in general for Michigan has improved. And so if that kind of continues into this game, we could see a much tighter game than what the spread currently would indicate. And listen, we've talked about this off air before. Like in rivalry games, you throw out records, you
Yep.
throw out the inability to do this, to do that. It doesn't matter. Like one team could be 0-11 coming into this game, one team could be 11-0 coming into this game, and the game could be significantly close, and an upset could honestly be pulled off. Like you throw out all logic and reasoning for what the team or teams have looked like throughout the regular season. You just do. I mean, even in this past weekend, we had that top five matchup right between Ohio State and Indiana. And then we had a bunch of other games that like people thought were going to be cakewalks. Alabama took a big loss to Oklahoma, right? Auburn upsets Texas A&M. Florida beats Ole Miss. Like these things happen. And
Yeah.
especially in rivalry weeks, do these things happen. So from the Ohio State perspective, you touched on it and you said I was going to touch on it a little bit more. And I am. We tweeted over the weekend that Will Howard deserves significantly more Heisman love than he is getting. He has been a very good quarterback for Ohio State. And I think coming into the year, everyone saw Ohio State as this incredibly talented team, which they are. And they're like, can Ohio State win in spite of Will Howard at quarterback? Essentially, can Will Howard be a game manager enough to just get Ohio State to let the rest of their dudes do what they're doing? Will Howard has become a dude for Ohio State. And whether you touched on it, whether you liked his little taunt of Kurt Signetti at the end of the game or not, I personally loved it. Like that firepower, that kind of like dog mentality of like we're the top of the conference, even though Oregon's leading the conference right now, like we're the big dogs in the conference. That's been missing from Ohio State for a lot of the last several years, 2, 3 years. That's been missing. They've seemed a lot more passive and less aggressive and less cocky. And whether you like it or not, if you're an Ohio State fan, you loved to see that. Love
Yeah.
to see it.
And
And
you
Will
could,
Howard's been a great leader for this team.
yeah, and you could say, I mean, obviously Kyle McCord, very quiet guy. I mean,
Yep.
even CJ Stroud, who was an elite college football quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't carry himself like he does now
Right.
in the NFL, and he was relatively quiet and not he was just a soft-spoken guy.
He
He's
was.
developed as a leader in the NFL, and I know he's had some struggles this year, but really Ohio State hasn't had that dog at quarterback since Justin
Since
Fields.
Justin Fields. Yep.
Yeah, and
Yep.
I don't think Will Howard's as talented as Justin, obviously, but that leadership, it's definitely important for the success of a
Yep.
college football team.
I fully agree. And look, one of the things I'm going to talk about with this Ohio State team, outside of what I just mentioned with Will Howard being really, really solid for this Ohio State program, Will Johnson, at least from what we're hearing, is not going to go in this game. Michigan's best cornerback, probably the best cornerback in all of college football. And Ohio State already has a significant advantage on the outside with that stable of wide receivers. Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate has been breaking out over the last several weeks. Like if they don't have Will Johnson, I fully expect Ohio State still to try and pound the rock. I still expect them to get Judkins and Henderson involved. But similar to our preview video last week talking about the Indiana game, I would play a significant amount of air raid offense against this Michigan team, especially if they don't have Will Johnson and the stable of wide receivers you have at Ohio State. I think you could pick that team apart. And it's not to say their other cornerbacks aren't good, aren't talented. Of course they are. But like we mentioned it, you throw a good ball to Jeremiah Smith, he's catching that football. Like they're just so
Doesn't even have to be a
talented.
good ball.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It really doesn't. The guy's going to catch pretty much anything that's within a 5 foot radius of him. I mean, the guy's incredible. So that Ohio State has a significant advantage, not just over Michigan, but over pretty much anyone they play regular season and into the postseason here. So for me, in looking at this game, there's so many advantages for Ohio State that it's just impossible for me to sit back here and feel confident that I could take Michigan in this game. I am taking Ohio State to win this game. I think the 20 and a half, 21, if it's up to that now is as of this recording, is a very big spread, especially in a rivalry game, especially in the game. And so with that being said, I wouldn't necessarily feel confident in Ohio State to cover the spread. I do, however, feel confident in Ohio State's ability to win this game. And I think it's a huge game for Ryan Day in this program. Ohio State's in the playoffs. Like they are a lock for the 12-team playoff at this point in time, especially with that second top 5 win against Indiana this past week. But Ryan Day needs this win. He needs this win.
Yeah,
And you sense it
absolutely.
from his players. You sense it from him and his coaching staff. I fully expect Ohio State to come out in this game with an unbelievable game plan and to be leaving Ohio Stadium victorious on Saturday, ending the regular season 11-1, setting themselves up for a rematch with Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. So very excited for this game. Really, very excited.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here, and Ohio State has everything they want
Speaker.
right in front of them, and they just have to take control of their destiny and
Yeah,
win these games. I mean, they are very capable of doing so.
fully
Um,
agree.
and then the next game here, we're going to talk about another big rivalry. South Carolina going up against Clemson, 18 versus 17. You know, South Carolina's having a great year, somewhat
Yep.
unexpected. Clemson, you could argue, is having a bounce back season after some people started to doubt them a bit. And both teams are right in the thick of it, right on the cusp of the playoffs. And I think this game has a lot of major implications. So I'm going to let you kick things off here.
Yeah. Well, once again, we're getting Bella in the picture here. But no, listen, in talking about this game, it's a huge game, huge rivalry game. And in talking about this game, I I'm so split on this game, truthfully. I don't know how you feel. Obviously, I'll hear about what your thoughts are here in a second. I'm so split on this game because we have South Carolina coming into this game on a current 5 game win streak, can take it to 6 in a row. And so they would end the season 9-3. And briefly touched on it when talking about Alabama taking a loss this past week and Ole Miss taking a loss this past week. So they're both 3 loss teams now. And people are questioning, can either one of them get into the postseason as a 3 loss team? To me, if you're talking about any SEC team that's going to get into the postseason as a 3 loss team outside of Georgia, because they've already secured themselves in the SEC championship game, if they lose that game and it's close, Georgia will be in, especially with that strength of schedule. But to me, I would feel more confident about South Carolina getting it as a potential 3 loss team than Alabama or Ole Miss, especially if they have a win last week of the year over ranked Clemson. And so South Carolina is trending up for me. It's not necessarily that Clemson is trending down for me, but Clemson got the doors beaten off of them first week of the year against Georgia. Then they started to look significantly improved, and you're like, okay, they're getting better and better and better in each week. Something you want to see from every team. So you're like, okay, maybe Clemson's on the rise. Cade Klubnik's playing a lot better. That defense is very solid. And then they take that really ugly loss to Louisville. And now, as of the standing sit currently, Clemson does not have a ranked win on their schedule. Similar to Indiana, similar to Penn State. So it's like, I don't know how much we know about this Clemson team. We know they're talented, but I don't know if we know, are they one of the 12 best teams in the country? We're going to find out this week, because I do think South Carolina is a solid team. They've had some bad losses this year in South Carolina, that is. They lost to an LSU team that's, not your kind of typical LSU team. Like, they're not as good as you would typically expect an LSU team to be. So South Carolina has had their moments of struggle. But for me, I feel slightly more confident in Sellers and the South Carolina program going into this game, even though it is going to be a home game for Clemson, which I do think is a big advantage for them. I just feel more confident in South Carolina. I think that defensive line can be, potentially a game wrecker for the Gamecocks. And if it is, I think Clemson can be in for a long day. I would not be surprised to see Clemson come out of this game victorious. And then, especially with Alabama and Ole Miss losing, Clemson wins this game. Then we kind of look to the ACC and we say, hey, did they get 2 teams in, maybe even 3 teams in? We do SMU, Miami, and Clemson, depending on what happens and what the ACC championship matchup is and all of that. Because, coming into this within the last week or two, Dabo Swinney had said it seems like it's the Big Ten and SEC Invitational. And the ACC and the Big 12 are kind of outside looking in, going to get 1 team, maybe 2 teams in at max. Well, Alabama and Ole Miss just opened up the door for everybody here, especially the ACC. So, Clemson's got a ton to play for, not just in this rivalry game to win, but also, to get into the 12-team playoff. With that being said, I feel a little more confident in Sellers. South Carolina Gamecocks as a whole, that defensive line, I think, can be absolutely stupendous for them. So I'm going to go South Carolina in a very close affair here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is going to be very close. For me, though, I think I'm going to lean towards Clemson to win this game, and there's a few reasons. So for South Carolina, yes, they've won 5 in a row. They look like they found something. I think Sellers has been a game changer for them at quarterback. He's had
Yeah.
moments where it was like, oh, this guy's clearly a freshman. Like, he's making mistakes. I think he's made a lot of good strides in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say their 3 losses, especially after this past week, they don't look that impressive. So
Right.
they lost to LSU at home, who we all know is unranked. They've been pretty lackluster this year. I mean, it's not that good of a team to lose to.
Sure.
LSU kind of had that SEC bump for playing in the conference and being ranked.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not that good of a win looking back.
Sure.
They got completely outclassed by Ole Miss, 27-3. Um, Ole Miss lost to Florida last week. They're a three
Yeah.
loss team. I mean, Ole Miss might be eliminated from the playoffs too. So that's another loss that maybe the team wasn't that great.
Right.
Alabama, same thing, lost 24-3 last weekend. They lost to them by 2 points in Bama. I mean, they almost pulled the upset there, but regardless, they have 3 losses against three-loss teams or more. So that is kind of telling to me a little bit. I do think obviously they've grown and gotten better since then
Sure.
with the 5 straight wins. Beating Texas A&M looked more impressive, but once again, Texas
Yep.
A&M loses in 4 overtimes to Auburn.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that win's not looking as good. Now, of course, we'll talk here in a second, but Texas A&M is still right in the thick of it.
Yeah.
But Clemson, on the other hand, hasn't played anybody of
Yep.
note, no ranked teams, as you mentioned. But the reason I'm going to go ahead and pick them is one, Cade Klubnik. I feel like he's had a really nice season, a few ups and downs, but for the most part, he's been great,
Yeah.
which is what Clemson has been missing in years past, especially the DJU era and even Cade Klubnik last year. It just the
Sure.
quarterback play was not good enough at Clemson. I think it's good enough to win this game. I like the fact that Clemson's at home, and
Hmm.
for South Carolina, they're coming in with a young quarterback in Sellers. There's a lot of inexperience there. It's a big stage, big rivalry game. It's hard for a freshman to come in there and win. So I'm going to pick Clemson here.
Sure.
I just feel like Dabo's going to have him ready to roll, as crazy as that sounds. I will say the one thing that could blow this game open is the two defensive ends on South Carolina, Kennard and Stewart.
Yep.
They are both studs. They are relentless. I mean, Kennard has 11 and a half sacks already.
That's a great call out.
They're very good. And if anything can kind of neutralize home field or Cade Klubnik kind of beating them, it's having that pass rush. So
Yeah.
keep an eye out for that, but I'm going with a little bit more experienced team in Clemson, and yeah, I think it's gonna be a close one as well.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I told you, I thought, this was basically a pick 'em. I was basically 50-50 here. So I love that we went opposite because I could have gone either way. And it sounds like the same for you. So really excited to kind of see which outcome we get, whether it's a Gamecocks win or Clemson
Yeah,
victorious in this game. And last game we're going to talk about here, man, big one. It's a trip to the SEC championship to face Georgia on the line. It's Texas and it's Texas A&M. So I'll throw it over to you first. I'll let you dive into this game, and then I'll give you my thoughts as well.
yeah. So I think this is another one. I mean, it's kind of funny to say, but like every rivalry game feels like it's just gonna be a close game,
Yeah,
and I mean that's the case. I mean, this game is two very talented teams, two teams with great recruiting, great talent. Obviously, Texas A&M's coming in here with a first-time head coach, first-year head coach, not first time,
yeah,
first-year head coach at
yeah,
Texas A&M. Sark has obviously been at Texas for a while now. They've been on the edge of winning it all.
yep,
Uh, so this is huge. And
yeah,
it goes
for sure.
beyond obviously just the implications down the road. This game in itself is big for both programs. For Texas A&M, this puts you on the map. This gets you, I think, even at 3 losses, gets you into the playoff no matter what. Um,
Yeah,
just beating a number 3 overall team. And
sure.
as of this recording, Quinn Ewers, who of course is a starting quarterback at Texas, he's expected to play. And we don't know what we're going to get out of him. He looked a little banged up during their last game. If he's confined to the pocket
Yep.
and that Texas defense is coming flying or Texas A&M defense is coming flying at him, that could cause some problems.
Yeah.
But also,
Fantastic point.
yeah, and also, I mean, the possibility does exist that Arch Manning has to play in this game.
Hmm.
And even if Quinn does play most of the game, I think they will try to tap into Arch Manning at some point. We saw it against Georgia when they looked for a spark. I think Sark is very comfortable going to Arch if he needs to. So regardless of Quinn's health, I feel like they at least have a solid backup, a guy who is highly regarded as a top overall pick for the following draft as a backup
Yep.
quarterback. So um, with that being said, I Texas A&M obviously lost this past weekend, going into 4 overtimes. I just think that's one, difficult for the psyche,
Sure.
two, difficult for their bodies. I mean, the fatigue, the overall beatdown. They played an extra game. I know it's not technically, but I mean,
Right.
yes, like they played a
But
lot more football than you would typically.
for sure.
Um, and that's a problem. Uh,
Hmm.
Texas is deep. Texas A&M, I know they're relatively deep as well, but in a game like this, it's gonna be knockout blow after knockout blow, big punches being thrown back and forth.
Yeah,
And when this game gets to the second half or beginning of the fourth, I don't know if Texas A&M is going to have the gas in the tank because they just
sure.
fought so hard last game. And these games are mentally exhausting, these rivalry games. And they just
Yeah,
had, well, maybe necessarily wasn't a rivalry game, but it was a just they got beat up real good.
yeah. I mean, it was a
Um,
hard fought game at Jordan
yeah.
O'Hare, man.
So
Really hard.
for me, I just I look at Quinn Ewers. I even look at Arch Manning. I look at the guys on the line of scrimmage for Texas. I just think that the depth and just the freshness of Texas is going to be the difference here. It might not be that they're necessarily the better team or more talented team. I just think Texas A&M got themselves in a position last week that unfortunately is going to have a carryover effect to this game.
Yeah,
And when you're playing a team like Texas that just hit like two, three guys deep at every position, I mean, if they rotate and stay fresh, I think that fourth quarter, second half, it's going to be where Texas takes over. They're going to get the ball to Bond. They're gonna air it out to Helm. I mean, they got some guys on the outside that can make things happen. So just I mean, just look at the depth, and that's going to tell the story of this game. And that's why I'm going to pick Texas to win. I think it's going to be close. The spread's -6. I think they're going to cover only because I don't think Texas A&M is going to be able to stick with them for all four quarters.
yeah. Well, look, I love the pick. And I'll be open and honest here before I give a few points. I'm going Texas as well in this game. Something that I don't think I heard you mention, and maybe you can tell me off the bat. I don't know off the top of my head right now. They were at one point. Is Vanderbilt ranked
No,
currently?
no, no.
No. So
They fell off pretty quick.
so
So that game looks a lot worse
if Texas
now.
loses this game, Texas has 0 ranked wins. Is that correct?
So Texas
Because the Michigan
has,
game week 2 looked great,
yeah,
but then
no,
Michigan turned into a 6-5 team. Currently, they got beat by Georgia. They don't have
yeah.
any ranked wins. Is that right?
You are correct that no one they had beaten are ranked as of today.
As of today.
Vanderbilt was ranked when they played. Vanderbilt was
Right.
25. Obviously, they've lost a bunch
Michigan was
since
ranked.
then.
Right.
Michigan was ranked. Oklahoma was ranked. So
So if Texas loses this game, is Texas out of the playoff with the fact they currently have no ranked wins?
that
I
that
personally wouldn't have them out, but I think it's a fair question.
yeah, I think that's a very fair question. And I think it depends in a sense. Because if Texas A&M goes to the championship and gets blown out or something, then that's bad news for Texas.
Right.
If they go in and win, that's bad news. So because that might take a spot from them just
Yeah.
by getting an at-large bid as the conference winner.
Right.
So I mean, it's difficult, but I still think Texas squeaks in.
I would
Um,
too, but I
they,
think it's an interesting talking point.
yeah, it is. I think the committee ultimately would want them in there.
I agree. And look, you already hit on it, and I'm glad to hear that it seems like Quinn Ewers is going to play because that's the biggest question mark for me. Because I think the world of Arch Manning, I think he's great. I think he's gotten some good playing time this year. But if you're telling me, hey, we would have to rely on Arch Manning going into Kyle Field with the 12th man against a very talented Texas A&M team and a Texas A&M team that's going to have their back against the wall after they just suffered a 4 overtime loss to Auburn at Jordan O'Hare the week before, and it's an SEC title berth on the line, I'd be nervous if I was
Yeah.
a Texas fan. I would still be nervous even with Quinn Ewers because you're going up against a really good team, both vying for a shot to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. So I would still be nervous, but Quinn Ewers has been more battle tested than Arch Manning has. And so with that being said, if Quinn Ewers is healthy, which it appears he is, or at the very least he is going to play, I would lean Texas. But one of the most important things you touched on, I think it's huge. Having a dual threat quarterback at the collegiate level is such a luxury. And you don't have to have a 50-50 split passes to run, options. But if Quinn Ewers' ankle, which I believe it's the ankle that he hurt or is
Yep.
bothering him or
Ankle.
whatnot,
Yep.
if he's a statue in the pocket and he can't escape with pressure coming towards him, that could spell trouble for Texas. And then you have a question mark of like, when do we go to Arch Manning, who could at least potentially give us that option of having, a scrambling quarterback. So that's something to watch, because even though Quinn Ewers is going, it doesn't mean he has the ability to scramble like he potentially normally would. And so if he's a statue back there, that becomes more problematic for the Texas Longhorns. And so this is I think it's going to be a very close game. I really do. I think Kyle Fields is going to be absolutely rocking. I think that 12th man is going to play a significant role in this game and keeping Texas A&M in this game. And I think if it weren't for the fact that an SEC title berth were on the line for both of these programs, I think Texas would probably win pretty handily, because Texas A&M suffered such a defeating loss last week. But with the fact that both of them can still make the SEC
Yeah.
championship game to take on Georgia, I think Texas A&M is going to be fired up. It's a rivalry game. It's going to be absolutely a great environment. I cannot wait to watch this game. I just think Texas has a little bit too much talent on the outside. You already mentioned it with Bond. Quinn Ewers is going to go as of this recording here. So with those two things, and the fact that I think Mike Elko is a great coach, but he came over from Duke. He's in the SEC for the first year. Sark is already a little bit more established in the SEC. He's made the postseason already. I think Texas is just a little bit more set up for success in this game in this moment. So with that said, I'm going Texas in a very close game. I think all of these games, rivalry games in general, are going to be close, but I'm going to go with the Longhorns in this one for a rematch in the SEC championship game from a regular season matchup with Georgia.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, and yeah, these games are really setting up to be a lot of fun. And I mean,
Yeah,
this honestly is probably the best week of college football. But
it really is.
maybe that might change with the new CFP. Who knows? That could
Right.
be a ton of
Right.
fun too.
Yeah.
With that being said, we just wanted to quickly touch on